Hi, I'm Mickey. Welcome to my toy room. And today we're going to be taking a look at a series of die-cast toy aeroplanes that I believe date from the mid-1970s. Now, before we get into it, I feel that I should just mention that this episode is as much a plea for information as it is a sharing of knowledge, because despite having had some of these models in my collection for a good few years now, I feel that I still know relatively little about them, and that's because information has been somewhat hard to come by. So if anyone watching this episode can add anything to the story, or correct me, or prove me wrong, then I would really appreciate if you got in touch. And if needed, I'll release an updated or corrected version of this episode at some point in the future. But for now, let's crack on and let's take a look at the DIECA Hobby series of die-cast toy aeroplanes. Growing up in the late 60s and throughout the 70s, die-cast toy aeroplanes and helicopters were a big part of my childhood. What you see before you now is my original Dinky Spitfire from 1969, complete with its incorrectly applied decals. Sadly, its dinky counterpart, my Ju-87 Stuka, didn't survive. I guess there's only so many shoot-downs and crashes into radar stations that one toy can take. Many of those toys of mine at the time came from the likes of Dinky, Corgi, Lintoy, Corgi Lintoy, and Matchbox, as well as countless others from less well-known names, and some from names not immediately associated with die-cast aircraft. And whether they were rotary wing or fixed wing, piston-powered or jet-propelled, subsonic, supersonic, I played with them all. And in doing so, I fought dogfights over England, Germany, the Pacific, even Southeast Asia. So I guess it was somewhat inevitable that when I started collecting toys some years later, toy aeroplanes would be a part of my collection, both those that I'd had in my childhood as well as others from that period that had passed me by at the time, with one such group being those released by the Takatoku Toy company. And the reason that they'd flown under my radar back in the 70s and had remained undetected until around 15 years ago was because by all accounts they were never actually released in the UK. Takatoku seemed to be better known for their transforming robots and figures of the early 80s. But before Transformers took over the world, in the 1970s, Takatoku released a series of die-cast toy aeroplanes in Japan under the brand name DIECA Hobby. Now, in 15 years, I've only ever found references to 4 models, but that's not to say that there weren't others. And in considering the subjects chosen for release, I think DIECA played it fairly safe, releasing a North American P-51D Mustang, a Messerschmitt ME or BF-109E, and 2 Mitsubishi A6M models, according to their boxes, an A6M3 Hamp and an A6M5 Zeke-52 to be precise, but more on those names later. Now, to anyone who grew up in the UK in the 60s and 70s, on seeing these for the first time, their similarity in terms of size and paintwork to the Dinky Big Plane series of the same period is obvious, especially at a time when, to the best of my knowledge, Dinky were producing the largest metal toy aeroplanes on the market. And in terms of their paintwork, the liveries of DIECA's P-51 and their 2 A6Ms are as appropriate to the subject as any that Dinky produced, although one could argue that the two-tone blue of DIECA's ME-109, whilst attractive, could be considered to somewhat let the side down when compared to the Dinky 109s. But bear in mind that Dinky also slipped up on occasion when it came to paintwork, but that's something I'll leave to a future episode. The DIECA models all feature motorised propellers, which was common to many, but not all, of Dinky's propeller aircraft, a feature that the size of the models lends itself to. And like the Dinky examples, the DIECA models were sold bearing only basic national markings of their respective countries, but included a separate decal sheet, giving the new owner a degree of customization. I have heard some collectors over the years trying to establish a direct link between the production of both the DIECA and the Dinky aeroplanes, but to me that seems unlikely given that between like-for-like models the castings are different. There's also the fact that DIECA produced a P-51, something that Dinky sadly never did, although that's not to say that DIECA maybe weren't influenced by the Dinky toy line. Looking at the DIECA models in greater detail, unlike the Dinky range, all four feature opening cockpit canopies, sliding or hinged as appropriate. And like many other toy aeroplanes, they all have retractable undercarriages. The P-51 and two Mitsubishis are also provided with separate drop tanks that require fitting once the model is removed from its box. The DIECA battery compartments are accessed via a cover opened by a sliding latch, as opposed to the screw-fastened covers on the Dinky models, and underneath their tailplanes they are cast with Made in Japan in English and the Takatoku company logo. As mentioned earlier, the models come with a separate decal sheet and a model-specific leaflet, which is printed almost entirely in Japanese, and which contains instructions regarding decal positioning, battery fitting, and canopy operating, as well as what seems to be a potted history of the aircraft from the odd date, word, or designation that could be made out in English. And with typical Japanese efficiency, included on these leaflets are the scales of the respective models, 155th for the 109, 165th for the P-51, with the two Mitsubishis coming in at a scale of 161st. With the DIECA and Dinky models side by side, to me the DIECA models are easily on a par with their European counterparts, and dare I say it, in some respects, even superior. And that's coming from a long-term, die-hard, Dinky big plane fan and collector. But even if one only considers the models as equals, what, to me, sets the DIECA range apart is their packaging. Starting with the internals, each model came in a polystyrene tray, which served to protect not only the model from damage, but also the box from damage by the model itself, which is something that the internal cardboard packaging supplied by Dinky in their early style boxes often failed to do, with those boxes often found with puncture marks from the aeroplane inside. And whilst on the subject, those Dinky cardboard inserts, once removed, were also a real pain in the backside to return to the box with the model, which may explain why so many boxed examples of the Dinkies are now found missing their inserts. The DIECA tray held the separate drop tanks where applicable, as well as a battery for the propeller motor, which was something that Dinky never provided, although I may be being unfair to Dinky because I can't actually remember any battery-powered toy in the UK at that time being sold with batteries, so maybe there was some sort of UK toy safety legislation that Dinky were complying with. But if the internal packaging sets the DIECA models apart from their peers, it's the boxes themselves that elevate them to a whole new level. The bright, vibrant colours were obviously designed to catch the eye immediately, and the use of the aeroplane image over the national insignia is, to me, a work of art. Looking at the back of the boxes, which is the same for all four toys, it possibly suggests that these were the only four aircraft released in this series, but I could be wrong as I haven't tried to translate the Japanese wording that surrounds the images. When comparing the DIECA boxes to what, to me, is the best of those early Dinky boxes, the Spitfire in its Battle of Britain movie commemorative box, whilst having very different styles of graphics, to me both are perfect in their own way. But when compared to the later Dinky packaging of blown plastic blisters over folded cardboard plinths, which for me adds absolutely nothing to the model inside, in my opinion the DIECA boxes win hand over fist. And so given what you've seen in this episode so far, the question I'd like to pose is this. Had these DIECA models been available in the UK at the same time as their Dinky counterparts, and had the DIECA series included a wider range of subjects, would they, when sold alongside those blister-packed Dinkies, have taken a bite out of Dinky's share of the market? And remember, that's coming from a Dinky big plane diehard, so let me know if you agree or not. I've included some longer turntable shots of the models at the very end of the episode, but to wrap things up, I find it interesting that DIECA used the World War II Allied Forces reporting names for the A6M, as I wonder as to the relevance of those code names to young Japanese lads getting their hands on these toys for the first time, or maybe they were better informed than I'm giving them credit for. And regarding those names, I wonder whether it was a mistake or deliberate subterfuge on DIECA's part in labelling their A6M3 as a HAMP. HAMP was the code name originally given to the A6M3 Model 32, which was a clipped wing version of the A6M3, which, when encountered for the first time by the Allies, was assumed to be a new type because of its different appearance, and hence initially given a different code name to the Zero, or Zeke, until it was discovered that it was in fact an A6M variant. So when I first saw this box, I was hopeful that it would have clipped wings, but was slightly disappointed to find that DIECA had simply used the same castings for both A6M models. But on DIECA's leaflet for the A6M3, it seems to show the A6M model number as 22, which had the familiar rounded wingtips of other A6Ms. And so the use of the same casting can be considered correct, and it's actually the use of the name hemp which is incorrect. So quite possibly, by using the name hemp, DIECA was simply trying to give the impression that this was a different toy to their other A6M, rather than admit that they were just producing two models of the Z, with the only actual differences between the two toys, apart from the paintwork, being a representation of the wing armament. And just to complete that bit of the story, the codename Hemp was originally Hap, but apparently changed due to objections from General Hap Arnold of the United States Army Air Forces. Finally, given that DIECA's P-51 Mustang wears United States Air Force markings, making it a P-51 in post-war service, as the USAF wasn't formed until 1947, I did wonder whether this should have actually been labelled as an F-51, and I have to admit to having to go back to my books to check the dates. But DIECA can be considered correct, as the P for Pursuit designation wasn't replaced by F for Fighter until 1948. Interestingly though, according to Google, the P-51 Mustang bearing this model's serial number, as well as the Victor Foxtrot Bravo codes, was actually shot down in 1944 over Europe. Thankfully, the pilot survived, although he did spend the rest of the war as a POW. So that's pretty much it for the DIECA hobby Diecast toy aeroplanes. I hope you've enjoyed watching. But before I say goodbye, I need to say a thank you, a big thank you, to everyone who has watched one or more of my previous episodes, especially those who actually took the time to leave me a comment, to which I've really enjoyed responding, and especially to those who have subscribed to this channel, because all of the comments and the views and the subscriptions have blown my socks off, to be honest, especially at this early stage of this YouTube channel. I started this channel just to share my passion for the things I collect with other like-minded people, which is something I've never really done before. And I felt that if I could have reached one person, then I would have achieved my aim. So to have had the response I've had so soon has been very unexpected and somewhat humbling. So thank you to everyone. And I'm going to shut up there, because if I carry on going, I'm either going to sound mushy or insincere. So thanks for watching this episode, and until the next one, take care, stay safe, and TTFN. Cheers.